The deafening crack of gunfire shattered the dawn silence as Madeline Vance ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. It was 1875 in the unforgiving territory of Arizona, and she had just become the most wanted woman in Copper Creek for a crime she didn't commit. Madeline's fingers trembled as she clutched the worn leather satchel to her chest. Inside was proof of her innocence. Ledgers showing the embezzlement at the town bank was the work of Harold Wilkes, not her. As the bank's only female clerk, she discovered the discrepancies 3 days ago. Now Wilkes had turned the town against her, claiming she'd stolen over $5,000. "There she is," a gruff voice shouted from beyond her temporary shelter. "Don't let the thieving wench escape." Madeline gathered the mud-stained hem of her skirt and ran. Her lungs burned as she sprinted toward the tree line, the morning dew soaking through her boots. 22 years of proper upbringing hadn't prepared her for life as a fugitive. Her chestnut hair, once neatly pinned, now whipped wildly around her face as she fled. The pursuit behind her grew louder. Wilkes had deputized half the men in town, offering a $100 reward for her capture. She pushed deeper into the forest, branches tearing at her clothes. If she could just reach the next town, find a marshal who would listen. A root caught her foot, and Madeline tumbled hard onto the forest floor. The satchel flew from her grasp, spilling papers across the ground. As she scrambled to collect them, rough hands seized her shoulders. "Got you now, Miss Vance," sneered Clive Bentley, the blacksmith's son, his grip painful on her arms. "You've led us on quite a chase." 2 more men emerged from the trees, their expressions triumphant as they surrounded her. "Please," Madeline pleaded, "I didn't steal anything. The ledgers prove Wilkes is the thief." "Save your stories for the judge," said Bentley, as the men bound her wrists with coarse rope. "Although I doubt you'll make it to trial, some folks are thinking a more immediate justice might be fitting." Fear crawled up Madeline's spine as they dragged her to her feet. These weren't lawmen, they were a mob with vengeance in their eyes. "The Reeves gang's camped nearby," said one of the men, a rancher named Tucker. "Let's take her there. They'll know how to handle her kind." Madeline's blood ran cold. The Reeves brothers were notorious outlaws who'd terrorized the Arizona territory for years. Being handed to them was a death sentence or worse. They forced her to walk for hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky, baking the earth beneath their feet. Her throat parched with thirst, her bound wrists raw and bleeding, Madeline stumbled forward as despair settled over her like a shroud. By mid-afternoon, they reached a clearing where a group of rough-looking men had made camp. The acrid smell of whiskey and unwashed bodies assaulted her senses as 5 pairs of eyes turned in their direction. A tall man with a scar bisecting his left eye stood, a malevolent grin spreading across his weathered face. "What have you boys brought us?" "Bank thief from Copper Creek," Tucker answered. "Thought you might want to teach her some manners before we return what's left of her to town." The scarred man, Elias Reeves, Madeline presumed approached, circling her like a predator. "A pretty little thief, ain't she?" He grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You know what we do to thieves, girl?" Madeline refused to show fear, though terror threatened to buckle her knees. "I'm not a thief. I discovered the real culprit, and now he's framed me." Reeves laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "They all say that." He turned to his men. "Tie her to that post. We'll decide what to do with her after supper." Rough hands dragged her to a sturdy wooden post at the edge of the camp. The outlaws secured her with additional ropes, binding her so tightly she could barely breathe. As the sun began its descent, Madeline watched in horror as the men drank and argued over her fate. "Could ransom her," suggested one. "To who? She's a criminal herself," countered another. "Could sell her down in Mexico," offered a third, his eyes traveling the length of her body in a way that made her skin crawl. Elias Reeves silenced them with a gesture. "We'll decide in the morning. For now, let her think about what's coming." Night fell, bringing with it a bone-deep chill. Madeline strained against her bindings, but the ropes only bit deeper into her flesh. Exhaustion and dehydration made her head swim. She must have dozed, for she startled awake to the sound of a horse's quiet nickering. The camp was silent, the outlaws asleep in their bedrolls. An empty whiskey bottle toppled beside the dying fire. A shadow moved at the perimeter of the camp, a man on horseback, his silhouette tall and imposing against the moonlit sky. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, tethering his horse to a nearby tree. He moved silently toward her, and Madeline held her breath, unsure if this newcomer represented salvation or further torment. He knelt beside her, and in the pale moonlight she could make out a strong-jawed face beneath the brim of a worn cowboy hat. His eyes, when they met hers, were the color of a summer storm. "Hold still," he whispered, drawing a knife from his belt. Madeline tensed, but instead of harming her, the knife sliced through her bonds with precision. As the ropes fell away, he gently rubbed her wrists, helping the blood flow return to her numbed fingers. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. She nodded, though she wasn't certain her legs would support her. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. The stranger's expression hardened as he glanced at the sleeping outlaws. "Because no man owns you." The conviction in his voice sent a strange warmth through her despite the danger surrounding them. "My name is Lucas O'Connor," he said, leading her toward his horse, "and we need to leave before they wake." "Madeline Vance," she replied, accepting his help as he lifted her onto his horse. "They took my satchel. It has proof of my innocence." Lucas scanned the camp, then moved silently to where the Reeves gang had piled their day's acquisitions. He returned moments later with her leather satchel. "This it?" Madeline nodded gratefully as he handed it to her, then mounted behind her. His arms encircled her waist as he took the reins, and they set off at a careful pace, keeping the horses' hooves quiet on the hard, packed earth. Only when they were well away from the camp did Lucas urge the horse into a gallop. Madeline clung to the saddle horn, the night air whipping past them as they rode beneath a canopy of stars. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel hope. They rode until dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Lucas guided his horse to a small creek where they dismounted to rest. "Thank you," Madeline said as he offered her his canteen. She drank deeply, the cool water reviving her parched throat. "How did you find me?" Lucas removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. "I've been tracking the Reeves gang for weeks. They killed a family outside Tucson last month, friends of mine." His jaw tightened. "I was planning my approach when those men from your town arrived with you." "They believe I stole from the bank where I work," Madeline explained, opening her satchel to show him the ledgers. "But these prove the bank manager, Harold Wilkes, has been embezzling funds. When I discovered the discrepancies, he framed me." Lucas examined the papers, his brow furrowed in concentration. "These look legitimate, but why would a town posse hand you over to outlaws instead of taking you to a proper jail?" Madeline's cheeks flushed with anger and shame. "Because I'm a woman who dared to accuse a respected man. Because it was easier to believe, I seduced my way into a position at the bank only to steal from it." She brushed dirt from her torn skirt. "The world doesn't take kindly to women who step beyond their prescribed roles, Mr. O'Connor." "Lucas," he corrected softly. His eyes, which she now saw were a striking blue-gray, studied her with respect rather than judgment. "And the world is often wrong about such things." He stood, offering her a hand. "There's a town about 15 miles west, Silver Springs. The marshal there is a fair man. He'll listen to your evidence." "And the Reeves gang?" Madeline asked. A shadow crossed Lucas's face. "They'll discover you're missing soon enough. We should move quickly." They rode double through the morning, the Arizona landscape stretching vast and beautiful around them. Madeline learned that Lucas was a former Texas Ranger who now worked as a bounty hunter. He'd been trailing the Reeves brothers for nearly a month. "What about you?" he asked. "How does a woman become a bank clerk in a place like Copper Creek?" "My father was the schoolteacher there," she explained. "He taught me mathematics. Literature gave me an education most girls don't receive. When he died 2 years ago, I needed to support myself. The previous bank manager was an old friend of my father's. He hired me despite the town's disapproval. And this new manager, Wilkes, arrived 6 months ago. Immediately took issue with a female clerk. I think he's been stealing since he arrived, but I only found proof last week." She sighed. "I confronted him privately, thinking he might return the money quietly." Instead, he emptied the safe that night and blamed me. Lucas's arm tightened momentarily around her waist, a gesture of support that shouldn't have affected her as it did. "We'll clear your name." They reached Silver Springs by early afternoon. The town was larger than Copper Creek, with a proper main street lined with businesses. Lucas guided his horse to the marshal's office, dismounting before helping Madeline down. Marshal James Burke was a graying man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened carefully as Madeline presented her case and the evidence in her ledgers. "These numbers tell a clear story, Miss Vance," he said finally. "I'll send a telegram to the territorial judge and to the bank's headquarters in Tucson. But until this is resolved, you should remain here where I can ensure your safety." "The Reeves gang may come looking for her," Lucas warned. The marshal nodded grimly. "All the more reason for her to stay close. Mrs. Holloway runs a boarding house that caters to respectable single ladies. She'll take good care of you, Miss Vance." Before they left the marshal's office, Lucas pulled Burke aside. Madeline couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw the marshal nod gravely several times. "I've asked the marshal to send word if Wilkes or the Reeves gang are spotted," Lucas explained as they walked toward the boarding house. "I'll be staying at the hotel across the street." "You're staying?" Madeline asked, surprised and oddly pleased. Lucas's expression softened slightly. "I started something when I cut those ropes. I intend to see it through." Mrs. Holloway was a plump, maternal woman who clucked sympathetically at Madeline's appearance and immediately ushered her upstairs to a hot bath and clean clothes. The borrowed dress was simple but clean, and Madeline nearly wept at the feeling of being human again. That evening, Lucas called at the boarding house, and Mrs. Holloway permitted them to talk on the front porch under her watchful eye. "The marshal received a response from Tucson," Lucas told her. "The bank's directors are sending an investigator. They're taking your accusations seriously." Relief washed over Madeline. "Thank you for everything you've done. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's nothing to repay." His voice was gruff. "What those men did treating you like property to be bartered it isn't right." "Is that why you said it? That no man owns me?" Lucas looked out at the darkening street, his profile strong in the fading light. "My mother was treated as property by my father. She had no rights, no voice, no choice in her own life." His hands tightened on the porch railing. "I promised myself I'd never see another person bound that way without intervening." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep inside Madeline. Impulsively, she placed her hand over his. "Your mother would be proud of the man you've become." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them before Mrs. Holloway pointedly cleared her throat from the doorway. "It's getting late, Miss Vance," she announced. Lucas stepped back, tipping his hat. "Good night, Madeline." "Good night, Lucas." For 3 days, Madeline settled into a cautious routine in Silver Springs. Each morning, she would meet with Marshal Burke to discuss any updates on her case. Each afternoon, Lucas would escort her on a short walk through town, always vigilant, his eyes scanning for threats. And each evening, they would sit on the boarding house porch, talking until Mrs. Holloway insisted it was time for Madeline to retire. She learned that Lucas had been a Texas Ranger for 5 years, before resigning his post after a disagreement with his commanding officer over the treatment of a group of Mexican farmers. Now he took on bounties selectively, focusing on truly dangerous criminals rather than minor offenders or those who might be innocent. In turn, she told him of her dreams to one day open a school for girls that would teach not just domestic skills but mathematics, science, and business subjects typically reserved for boys. "You'd be an excellent teacher," Lucas said. "You explain your banking ledgers with real passion." Madeline laughed. "Most men would find that peculiar." "Most men are fools," he replied simply. On the 4th day, disaster struck. Madeline was at the marshal's office when a telegram arrived from Copper Creek. Harold Wilkes had disappeared with what remained in the bank's safe. Worse, the Reeves gang had raided the town the previous night, killing 2 men who tried to stop them. "They'll be coming here," Lucas said grimly. "They know this is the closest sizable town." Marshal Burke nodded. "I've deputized 4 men already. We'll be ready if they show up." "They won't attack the town directly," Lucas warned. "They'll wait and watch. Their target will be Madeline. Me, she asked. Why would they care about me now? Because you escaped, Lucas explained. Men like the Reeves brothers can't abide that kind of challenge to their power. And they'll want to silence you before you can identify them to the authorities. That night, Lucas insisted on staying at the boarding house, sleeping in a chair in the hallway outside Madeline's room despite Mrs. Holloway's initial protests. The marshal had positioned his deputies at strategic points throughout the town, but Lucas trusted his own vigilance above all others. Madeline lay awake in her bed, listening to the occasional creak of the floorboards as Lucas shifted in his chair. His presence beyond her door brought both comfort and a strange, fluttering sensation in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Over the past few days, she'd found herself increasingly aware of him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands when he helped her over a rough patch of road, the deep timbre of his laugh on the rare occasions she managed to amuse him. It was foolish to develop feelings for a man she barely knew, especially in such dangerous circumstances, but her heart seemed unconcerned with logic. A soft knock on her door startled her from these thoughts. "Madeline," Lucas whispered, "are you awake?" She rose quickly, pulling a shawl around her nightdress before opening the door slightly. "What is it?" His expression was tense in the dim light of the hallway's single lamp. "2 riders circled the town about 20 minutes ago. Could be scouts for the Reeves gang. What should we do?" "Marshal Burke wants to move you to a less obvious location at first light. The boarding house is too well known." He hesitated. "Try to get some sleep. I'll be right here." Madeline nodded, though sleep seemed impossible now. She closed the door and returned to bed, pulling the quilt tight around her shoulders. Outside, an owl hooted mournfully, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered with a haunting cry. Dawn arrived with a soft pink glow filtering through the curtains. Madeline dressed quickly in her borrowed clothes, packing her few possessions in the leather satchel. When she opened her door, Lucas was still there, looking alert despite having spent the night in an uncomfortable chair. "Marshal Burke is waiting downstairs," he said, taking her satchel. "He's arranged for you to stay at the widow Channing's farm just outside town. It's more defensible and less obvious." Mrs. Holloway provided them with a hearty breakfast and a basket of food to take to the widow's farm. The older woman hugged Madeline tightly before they left. "You be careful, dear, and you," she fixed Lucas with a stern look, "you take good care of this young lady." "Yes, madam," he replied solemnly. Marshal Burke accompanied them to the small farm about 3 miles outside town. The widow Channing was a sturdy, silver-haired woman with calloused hands and sharp eyes. Her husband had been a federal marshal killed in the line of duty 10 years earlier, and she maintained his collection of firearms with expert care. "No one will harm the girl while she's under my roof," she assured them, showing them the reinforced doors and shuttered windows of her modest home. "And I can still shoot the eye out of a rabbit at 50 paces. I'll return by nightfall," Lucas promised Madeline. "The marshal and I are going to scout the area, see if we can locate the Reeves gang before they make a move." Madeline nodded, though anxiety knotted her stomach at the thought of him facing the dangerous outlaws. "Please be careful." Something in her expression must have betrayed her feelings, for his eyes softened as he looked at her. "I will," he said quietly, his hand briefly squeezing hers before he departed. The day passed slowly at the Channing farm. The widow kept Madeline busy helping with chores, feeding chickens, kneading bread, mending clothes, tasks that occupied her hands but left her mind free to worry. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, and the air held the electric charge of an approaching storm. "Rain's coming," Mrs. Channing observed. "Let's hope your cowboy makes it back before it hits." "He's not my cowboy," Madeline replied automatically, though her cheeks warmed. The widow merely smiled knowingly and continued shelling peas. "I've seen the way he looks at you, girl. And the way you look at him reminds me of my Daniel and me way back when." Before Madeline could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Mrs. Channing moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. Her expression hardened. "Get the rifle from above the fireplace," she instructed calmly. "Those aren't our friends." Madeline's heart hammered as she retrieved the Winchester rifle and handed it to the older woman. Through the window, she could see 4 riders approaching and recognized Elias Reeves at their head. "How did they find me?" she whispered. "Probably followed your tracks from town," Mrs. Channing replied, checking the rifle's ammunition. "Or perhaps someone talked. There's always someone willing to trade information for money." The widow positioned herself at the window, rifle ready. "When I start shooting, you run out the back door. There's a root cellar 20 paces behind the house, hidden by the rose bushes. Hide there until help comes." "I can't leave you to face them alone," Madeline protested. Mrs. Channing fixed her with a steely gaze. "My Daniel died protecting the innocent. I'd be honored to do the same. Now promise me you'll run when I tell you." Reluctantly, Madeline nodded. The riders were closer now, close enough that she could see the cruel smile on Elias Reeves's scarred face. "Well, well," he called out. "Miss Vance. We've been looking everywhere for you. Very rude of you to leave our hospitality so abruptly." "Get off my property," Mrs. Channing shouted. "The marshal knows she's here. He'll be back any minute with a posse," Reeves laughed. "The marshal and his men are chasing their tails 10 miles north of here. Now, send out the girl and we'll leave you in peace, old woman." "Not happening," Mrs. Channing replied, and fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt just in front of the lead horse. Chaos erupted. The outlaws scattered, taking cover behind trees and the well. Gunfire peppered the front of the house, splintering wood and shattering a window. Mrs. Channing returned fire methodically, moving from window to conceal that she was alone in her defense. "Now, girl," she shouted as she reloaded. "Out the back, just as we planned." Madeline hesitated only a moment before slipping through the back door. She ran, crouching low, toward the rosebushes Mrs. Channing had indicated. Behind her, the gunfire continued in irregular bursts. The root cellar was well concealed, its doors covered with dirt and vegetation. Madeline pulled them open and descended into the cool darkness, closing the doors behind her. The earthen space was small but clean, with shelves of preserved foods lining the walls. She huddled in the farthest corner, straining to hear what was happening outside. The gunfire had stopped. In its place came the sound of men's voices, too distant to make out the words, followed by the terrible crash of breaking wood. They had breached the house. Minutes passed like hours as Madeline waited in terrified silence. Had they killed Mrs. Channing? Were they searching for her now? The first drops of rain began to fall, pattering on the cellar doors above her head. Suddenly, the doors were wrenched open. Madeline stifled a scream as a silhouette appeared against the darkening sky, but it wasn't Elias Reeves who stared down at her. "Madeline, thank God." Lucas reached down, helping her climb out of the cellar. His clothes were soaked with rain and splattered with mud, his expression a mixture of relief and urgency. "Are you hurt?" "No, but Mrs. Channing, she's alive, wounded in the shoulder, but she'll recover. Marshal Burke is with her now." The rain was falling steadily now, and Lucas pulled her toward a stand of trees where 2 horses waited. "The Reeves gang split up when they heard us coming. 3 fled north, but Elias is still out there." As if summoned by his name, a figure on horseback emerged from the gloom, leveling a pistol at them. "That's far enough, Ranger," Elias Reeves snarled. "The girl comes with me." Lucas pushed Madeline behind him, his own gun drawn in a smooth, practiced motion. "It's over, Reeves. Your brothers have abandoned you. The territorial marshals are on their way." "Then I have nothing to lose," Reeves replied, his scarred face twisted with hatred. "Drop your weapon or I'll kill you both right here." Lucas's stance didn't waver. "You know I can't do that. Then she dies first." Reeves shifted his aim toward Madeline. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Lucas lunged forward as Reeves fired, the bullet grazing Lucas's arm instead of hitting Madeline. Lucas returned fire, his shot striking Reeves in the chest. The outlaw toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the muddy ground. Lucas staggered slightly, clutching his bleeding arm. Madeline rushed to his side, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind the wound. "We need to get you to a doctor," she said, her fingers working quickly despite their trembling. "It's just a graze," he assured her, though his face was pale beneath the rain and mud. "Let's get back to the farm. The marshal will need help with Mrs. Channing." They rode double on Lucas's horse, the rain washing away the blood and dirt as they traveled the short distance back to the farmhouse. Marshal Burke had already loaded Mrs. Channing into a wagon and was preparing to transport her to town. "The widow will be fine," he told them. Tough as old leather, that woman. She took down 2 of the Reeves gang before they got to her. He nodded at Lucas's bandaged arm. "You should come back to town too, get that looked at properly." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. A doctor tended to Lucas's arm, confirming it was indeed just a flesh wound that would heal cleanly. Mrs. Channing was recovering well, her main complaint being that she couldn't tend her chickens. The remaining members of the Reeves gang were captured by a territorial marshal's posse 20 miles north of Silver Springs. Most significantly for Madeline, a telegram arrived from the bank's headquarters in Tucson. Their investigator had tracked down Harold Wilkes in Mexico and recovered most of the stolen funds. More importantly, they had cleared Madeline of all wrongdoing and offered her a position at their main office. "It's a remarkable opportunity," she told Lucas as they walked through Silver Springs' small public garden. "Head bookkeeper with twice my previous salary." "You deserve it," he said sincerely. "Your skills saved that bank from a much greater loss." They sat on a bench beneath a flowering tree, comfortable in each other's company after all they had endured together. Lucas's arm was healing well, though he still wore a light bandage beneath his shirt. "What will you do now?" Madeline asked. "With the Reeves gang gone, I mean." Lucas gazed thoughtfully at the distant mountains. "There's always another bounty, another wrong to right." He hesitated, then turned to face her. "Unless I had a reason to stay in one place." Madeline's heart quickened. "What sort of reason?" "A compelling one." His eyes held hers, filled with an emotion she'd seen growing there over the past week. "Madeline, I know we've only known each other a short time, but these days have shown me more about you than years might reveal in ordinary circumstances." "I feel the same," she admitted softly. "When I cut you free from that post, I had no idea I was beginning something that would change my life." He took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "I told you then that no man owns you, and I meant it. You're free to choose your own path, whether that's Tucson or anywhere else." "And if my path were to include you?" she asked, hardly daring to breathe. The smile that transformed his face made her heart soar. "Then I would consider myself the luckiest man in the territory." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. Instead, Madeline closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a sweet, tender kiss that promised much more to come. When they finally parted, Lucas kept her hand in his. "I have a small ranch near Tucson. Nothing fancy, but good land with a creek running through it. I've never spent much time there, always being on the trail, but with the right partner." "It sounds wonderful," Madeline said, joy bubbling up inside her. "Though I'd still like to take that position at the bank, at least for a while." Lucas nodded. "Of course, no man owns you, remember. We build a life together as equals or not at all." 2 weeks later, Madeline sat beside Lucas in a stagecoach bound for Tucson. Marshal Burke had provided a glowing letter of recommendation to accompany her to her new position. Mrs. Channing, arm still in a sling but otherwise recovered, had gifted her with a beautiful hand-stitched quilt for your new home when the time comes. As the stagecoach rolled through the magnificent Arizona landscape, Madeline looked at the man beside her, this honorable, brave cowboy who had saved her in more ways than simply cutting ropes. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "Not one," she assured him, threading her fingers through his. "I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't come along that night." "Some things are meant to be," Lucas said simply. "I was supposed to find you." The road to Tucson stretched before them, promising new beginnings. They had agreed to court properly for 6 months before making more permanent arrangements, though both knew in their hearts where this journey would lead. "Tell me more about this ranch of yours," Madeline said, resting her head against his shoulder as the coach swayed gently beneath them. Lucas described the small but sturdy house, the clear creek that never ran dry, the stand of cottonwood trees that provided shade in the summer heat. He spoke of improvements he'd like to make, perhaps expanding the house, adding a proper garden. And there's a flat piece of land just east of the house, he added. That would be perfect for a small schoolhouse if a certain teacher wanted to realize her dream of educating young women. Madeline looked up at him in surprise and delight. You remembered. I remember everything you've told me, he said softly. Your dreams matter to me, Madeline. The stagecoach arrived in Tucson 3 days later. The bustling territorial capital was larger and more developed than either Copper Creek or Silver Springs, with proper stone buildings lining the main streets, and a diverse population that included Anglo settlers, Mexican families who had lived there for generations, and indigenous people from various tribes. The bank arranged temporary lodging for Madeline at a respectable boarding house for single working women, while Lucas took a room at a nearby hotel. Each morning, he would escort her to the bank, and each evening they would explore the city together, often ending the day with dinner at one of Tucson's surprisingly varied restaurants. Madeline thrived in her new position. The bank directors quickly recognized her exceptional skill with numbers and her meticulous attention to detail. Within a month, she had reorganized their entire bookkeeping system, making it both more efficient and more secure against potential embezzlement. Lucas, meanwhile, made improvements to his ranch, located about 5 miles outside the city. He hired workers to repair the roof, add a proper porch, and expand the main bedroom. When he wasn't at the ranch, he occasionally took short bounty hunting assignments in the immediate area, never venturing more than a day's ride from Tucson. Their courtship progressed with a sweet intensity. Each was cautious, aware of the speed with which they had formed their attachment, yet neither could deny the profound connection that had been forged in those dangerous days. They learned each other's habits, preferences, dreams, and fears. They argued occasionally, Madeline's stubborn independence, sometimes clashing with Lucas's protective instincts, but always found their way back to understanding. 4 months after their arrival in Tucson, Lucas took Madeline to his ranch for the first time. The autumn air was crisp and clean as they rode out from the city, the desert landscape painted in subtle hues of amber and gold. It's not much to look at, Lucas said as they approached a modest adobe house nestled among cottonwood trees, but it's solid and sound. To Madeline, it was perfect. The house was simple but well constructed, with thick walls that would keep it cool in summer and warm in winter. A creek bubbled cheerfully nearby, and behind the house stretched open grassland where a few horses grazed. "This is yours?" she asked, taking in the peaceful beauty of the place. "Ours," he corrected softly, "if you want it to be." He led her through the house 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a new cast iron stove, a comfortable sitting room with bookshelves he'd built himself. Everything was clean and well-ordered, if somewhat sparse. "The furniture is minimal," he apologized. "I thought you might want to choose pieces yourself." "It's wonderful," she assured him, touched by his consideration. "I can already imagine how it will look when we make it a home." They picnicked by the creek, laying out a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree. Lucas had packed a simple but delicious meal of cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apples, along with a bottle of decent wine. As they ate, he pointed out the boundaries of his property and shared his plans for its development, perhaps raising horses eventually, or even cattle if the venture proved successful. "And there," he said, indicating a flat area about 100 yards from the house, "is where I thought your school might go. I've spoken with a builder in town. It would be simple to start just 1 room, but designed so it could be expanded if needed." Madeline stared at him in amazement. "You've already consulted a builder about my school?" Lucas looked suddenly uncertain. "Have I overstepped? I didn't mean to presume." She silenced him with a kiss, her heart too full for words. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his. "No one has ever believed in my dreams the way you do." "Then they were fools," he said simply. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lucas took her hand. His expression was solemn yet filled with tenderness. "Madeline Vance, I know we agreed to wait 6 months, and I'm willing to honor that if you need more time. But I've known since that night by the creek, when I found you bound to that post, that you were someone extraordinary." He drew a small box from his pocket. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears of happiness welled in Madeline's eyes as she looked at this remarkable man who had risked his life to save her, who respected her independence while offering his unwavering support, who saw her not as property to be owned, but as a partner to be cherished. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas O'Connor." The ring was simple but beautiful, a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires that matched the blue-gray of his eyes. As he slipped it onto her finger, the setting sun caught the stones, sending prisms of light dancing across their joined hands. They were married 2 weeks later in Tucson's small Methodist church. The ceremony was modest but meaningful, attended by a few friends they had made in the city. Marshall Burke traveled from Silver Springs to stand as Lucas's best man, and Mrs. Channing, fully recovered from her wound, came to support Madeline. "He's a good man," the widow told her as she helped Madeline prepare. "Reminds me of my Daniel, strong but gentle, and smart enough to know he's found a treasure in you." Their wedding night at the ranch was a tender discovery of each other. Lucas was attentive and patient, his touch reverent as he showed Madeline the physical expression of their love. For Madeline, who had been raised with typical Victorian reticence regarding such matters, the experience was a beautiful revelation that left her wondering how something so natural could be considered improper. In the days that followed, they settled into the rhythms of married life. Lucas continued to make improvements to the ranch while taking occasional bounty hunting assignments. Madeline maintained her position at the bank but reduced her hours to 3 days a week, using her additional free time to develop plans for her school. With Lucas's encouragement, she approached the Territorial Education Authority with a proposal for a girls' academy that would offer not just traditional subjects, but also mathematics, science, business principles, and land management, practical knowledge that would serve young women well in the developing territory. To her surprise and delight, the proposal was met with interest. Several influential families in Tucson had daughters they wished to educate properly, and the existing schools were overcrowded and focused primarily on boys. A grant was approved for Madeline to establish a small pilot program, with the promise of additional funding if it proved successful. Construction began on a simple schoolhouse at the ranch that spring. Madeline hired 2 additional teachers, a young widow with a science background and an unmarried woman who had previously taught at a girls' seminary in Boston. By summer, they were ready to welcome their first 12 students, girls ranging in age from 10 to 16. Lucas watched with pride as Madeline threw herself into this new venture. She was a natural teacher, patient yet demanding, kind yet unwilling to accept less than a student's best effort. The girls thrived under her guidance, many discovering intellectual abilities they had never been encouraged to develop. "You've built something remarkable here," he told her one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset after a long day. The school term had been underway for 2 months, and already they had a waiting list of families interested in enrolling their daughters. "We've built it," Madeline corrected, leaning against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Nonsense. You're the most capable woman I've ever known. You would have found a way." She smiled, knowing he truly believed this. Perhaps, but it would have been a much harder and lonelier path. She took his hand, placing it gently over her abdomen, "And we wouldn't be expecting our first child next spring." Lucas's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as her words registered. "A baby, we're having a baby," Madeline nodded, laughing as he swept her into his arms, spinning them both in circles of joy. When he finally set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Are you happy?" She asked softly. "Beyond words," he replied, kissing her tenderly. "Boy or girl, this child will be so loved." "And free," Madeline added. "Free to choose their own path, just as you've always supported me in choosing mine." As her pregnancy progressed, Madeline continued teaching, though she delegated more responsibilities to her fellow teachers. Lucas became even more protective, insisting on driving her to and from the schoolhouse each day despite it being only a short walk from their home. Their child, a daughter they named Eleanor, after Madeline's mother was born on a beautiful spring morning in 1877. She had Lucas's blue-gray eyes and Madeline's determined chin, and from her earliest days, showed signs of a lively intelligence that delighted both her parents. By the time Alina was 3, the school had expanded to 30 students and 3 full-time teachers besides Madeline, who now served primarily as headmistress. The original one-room schoolhouse had been enlarged twice, and plans were underway for a proper dormitory to accommodate girls from outlying ranches and farms who currently boarded with families in Tucson. Lucas had gradually transitioned away from bounty hunting, focusing instead on breeding and training horses, a venture that proved both more profitable and less dangerous. His reputation for producing well-trained, reliable mounts spread throughout the territory, bringing a steady stream of customers to the ranch. They welcomed a son, James, in 1880, completing their family. As the children grew, they embodied the best qualities of both parents. Alina's quick mind and independent spirit, balanced by James's thoughtful nature and quiet strength. Life wasn't without its challenges. Droughts threatened the ranch, economic downturns affected the school's enrollment, and occasional outbreaks of frontier violence reminded them of the precarious nature of their hard-won peace. Yet through it all, Lucas and Madeline faced each obstacle as they had from the beginning together, as equal partners. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Lucas surprised Madeline with a special gift, a small silver pendant in the shape of a cut rope. "To remember how our story began," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. "When I found you tied to that post, I had no idea I was cutting the rope that would bind us together forever." Madeline touched the pendant, her eyes soft with memory. "You said no man owns me." "And I've spent 10 years trying to live up to those words," he replied. "Have I succeeded?" She looked around at the life they had built together, their thriving ranch, the successful school that had educated nearly 100 young women, their beautiful children playing in the yard, all of it a testament to a partnership founded on mutual respect and love. "Beyond my wildest dreams," she assured him, drawing his face down for a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their decade together. "We own nothing but each other's hearts, and those were freely given." As the sun set on their 10th anniversary, casting long golden shadows across the land they had nurtured together, Lucas and Madeline O'Connor stood hand in hand on their porch, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Their story had begun with an act of liberation, a cowboy cutting a rope, declaring that no man could own another human being, and had blossomed into a love that embodied that very freedom. It was not the life either had imagined for themselves before that fateful night, but it was infinitely more precious for having been chosen freely, built painstakingly, and cherished completely by two people who had found in each other not an owner or possession, but a true partner for the journey.